Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the 146.88 PCRN VHF Rag2Net. And this is going to be a little different. So I'm just going to go straight into a script here and do a round of check-ins because we've got Greg already set up here, and I've got the Zoom thing going, and I've got Facebook Live going. Start off stations A through N, Alpha through November, that want to check in here by the radio.
KI4DCR. Check in N4GTI, Will in Raleigh.
KI4DCR. This is WA4IHM, Brock in Wake Forest. Good evening, Charleston and Ned. Please check me in and out tonight, but I'll be listening.
All right, I got N4GTI and WA4IHM. Will is hanging around and Brock is out. Stations, Oscar through Zulu.
KI4DCR.
W4GTO, Joe in Wake Forest.
KI4DCR. KE4PNT, Randy in Southwest Raleigh.
KI4DCR. Please check in John, N4YFU, inside the belt line. KI4DCR. Check in KI4CFS, Martin in North Raleigh.
There's Martin.
KI4DCR. WA4OSS, Charlie in Nightdale. KI4DCR. KO4SKA, Wallace for Raleigh. Please check me in and out. KI4DCR. This is N0RD, Jeff in Henderson.
All right, we picked up W4TTO. Joe is in and sticking around for the net. Randy, KE4PNT. John, N4YFU. KI4CFS. Martin Brossman is in. WA4OSS. Charlie and Nightdale is in. KO4SKA. Wallace was in and out but listening. And N0RNE. Jeff is in. Got a couple more here. KW4BT. Herb in Middlesex is in with a meeting here on on Facebook Live. Okay, I got you, Herb. And I've got Rose and Danny and a few others here. And then I've got some people on Zoom. All right. Anybody else A through Z real quick, and then we're going to get to questions with Greg right away.
Charles, if you can copy, I'm having some radio problems, but anyway, N4PNC, November 4, Bravo, November 28.
I got part of that, Dave, and I got you in and out because I was not getting you enough to carry on a conversation, but I will come back to you and try you in a little bit. And I got Scott, K9SJP in Winterville. All right, we are going to go to questions and start with Will N4GTI. And what is your question for Greg? You're up.
Okay, KI4DCR in the net, N4GTI, Will in Raleigh. Great to have you on here, Greg, and thanks to Charles and all who handle the technology to allow you to be with us. I don't have video of you at present, but I have a clear image of when you were my weather guy. So my question is, how do I really understand barometric pressure and how it relates to weather and weather prediction? You know, I have a little desktop weather station. It shows barometric pressure rising and falling, you know, from fair to unsettled. But what is actually happening with the air? Is it denser or is it moving downward, or is there less around us for lower pressure? The range, you know, I know it seems really small, like 29.8 to 30.2. That seems like a really small change, but there's a big difference in observed weather when it, you know, across that range. So always wondered what actually is going on. N4GTI.
Okay.
All right. Okay, I'm going to get the microphone. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, I appreciate the question. There actually is something called a diurnal cycle, where even if there wasn't any weather system moving through, you would still see the pressure fall twice a day and rise twice a day by a relatively small amount, but it's still very discernible. So you sort of have to separate that out from what's actually going on in terms of systems moving through. And usually the tendency of the pressure is the more important thing. Like when you look at a home barometer, it'll, if you have one like I do, it's old-fashioned, it'll say things like fair, stormy, and all that type of stuff. But the absolute value of the pressure is not nearly as important as the tendency of it. Is it falling? Is it falling rapidly? Was it falling, but now it's rising? All of those things are really more important than the actual value itself. So you could have an intense area of low pressure come through, and your pressure drops to 29.4 inches, and the front passes, and now it's on its way up, but it's still at a low value. So the value is not telling you nearly as much as the fact that it stopped falling, now it's going up, the sun's coming out, it's getting nice again, or at least sunny. And so again, it's the tendency of the pressure that we look at much, much more closely than the actual value itself. And pressure is just defined as the weight of the air above you. And so, you know, the higher the pressure, the more air you have above you, and the lower the pressure, the less you have above you. And that comes about by air rising and then evacuating at the top of the atmosphere. So if you're removing more mass than you are bringing in at the bottom, your pressure goes down. And if you're bringing in more mass at the top than you're evacuating at the bottom, your pressure goes up. So does that make any sense at all?
Yes, I appreciate that explanation. I was always, wondering, I think of it as like pressure trapped in a tire, and I can understand that because you have the confinement of the walls of the tire, but I didn't quite understand how the atmosphere way up high, creates the pressure.
Yeah, it's actually the forces, and the only time of the year this isn't true is in the summertime, but generally in the fall, winter, and spring, the winds are much stronger aloft than they are at the ground. And so the forces up there are stronger, so you're almost always either bringing in more mass than you're losing at the ground, or you're evacuating more mass than you're bringing in at the ground. And so that's why we're so focused on the upper atmosphere, because what goes on up there is basically reflected by what goes on here at the surface.
Got it. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Greg. Back to net control in 4GTI.
Okay, that was a good question, Will, and I appreciate it. So let's see. Next, we've got Joe, WA4TTO. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, this is W4TTO. Hello, the group, and hello, especially to Greg Fishel. Good to see you again here on the screen. I once met you at one of the RAR's club meetings years ago. Anyway, my question is, if you could explain to some of our listeners what the dew point represents, and how does that affect the weather, or how is that associated with the weather? Over to you.
Greg, you're up. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the official definition of the dew point is the temperature at which you have to cool the air to reach saturation. So let's say today the temperature was 75 and the dew point was 45. If you could somehow figure out a way to cool the air 30 degrees down to the dew point, then your relative humidity would be 100%. But we tend to look at it as what we call an absolute humidity instead of a relative humidity. Because the higher the dew point, the more water vapor there is in the air. And that's different than how much could be in the air given a certain temperature. For instance, if you have a temperature of 50 and a dew point of 30, your relative humidity is going to be around 50%. If you increase the temperature 20 degrees to 70, then your humidity is going to drop in half to 25%. And if you increase the temperature to 90, it drops in half again, you're down to 12.5%. The absolute amount of water vapor has not changed, but the relative humidity has changed because you've changed the temperature. And so when it comes to human comfort, evaporation is one of the key ways that your body cools itself. Is when you sweat, that water evaporates off of your skin, and that takes heat away from the air and makes you feel cooler. And so the higher the dew point, the more moisture there is in the air, the less effective that process is. And it sort of reaches the point where the air is saying, look, I got all the water I need. I don't need any of the stuff on your skin. And so it doesn't evaporate, and it just sits there on you, and you feel miserable. So again, the main thing with the dew point is it's telling us how much water vapor is in the air, irrespective of what the temperature is, and therefore irrespective of what the relative humidity is. It's more of an absolute humidity, if that makes any sense.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it. W4TTO, back to net control.
All right, this is KI4DCR with the net, with Greg Fishel as our guest. Our video keeps going in and out a little bit, but it'll pop back, I think, here in a minute. Not sure what's going on with that. I'll go to Randy next and see what Randy's question is. KE4PNT Randy was.
Well, I'm curious about the models that the weather forecasters use. They often refer to a European model and an American model. And I wondered if Greg could briefly describe what goes into that. How does a European model get its data about North Carolina? And if he could just briefly explain some about the models that the forecasters use, KE4PNT.
Go ahead.
Did you get that question, Greg?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
All right, go ahead.
One of the neat things about meteorology is that the entire world actually cooperates with each other. All of the data that is collected in all of the countries all around the world is shared. And so the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting gets that, NOAA gets that, everybody gets it. And so it's simply a matter then of what you do with those observations. And numerical models are nothing more than a mathematical simulation of how the atmosphere behaves. Like, there are certain laws of physics, certain laws of thermodynamics, and these equations mimic, in a sense, those laws. And so you plug all of the observations into these equations, and then they keep spitting out at certain time intervals how things should change in the future. And one of the things that the European Center has done better, at least up until now, than the Americans have, is that they have a superior what's called data assimilation system, where they're constantly taking new updated observations from all around the world and plugging them into their model, and in a sense sort of self-correcting it. Like, it's almost like if you're driving along a highway and your hands are on the steering wheel and you start to drift a little bit, then all of a sudden you grab the steering wheel and bring yourself onto the center of the road. It's the same thing with this, where the European Center does a really good job of taking new observations that are coming in all the time and bringing the car back onto the middle of the road. And so their overall skill scores are superior to the American model. Now, the Americans are making progress, and there are times, last hurricane season, there were times when the American model outperformed the European. So it's not a slam dunk the way it appeared that it used to be, where you just didn't even look at the American model. But there are models on different scales. There are global models, there are regional models, there are what are called mesoscale models, where you're just looking at a very small area trying to determine whether or not there are going to be thunderstorms or not. So there's a million different types of them, but it all comes down to the fact that they're using mathematics to simulate all of the laws of physics and thermodynamics that we know of, and then looking at how those variables are changing with respect to another and how they will continue to change in the future. And as you might expect, the accuracy is pretty good for the first couple of days, and then by the time you get to a week or two out, it goes to heck in a handbasket.
Okay. Thank you very much for obvious that it can't look ahead very far. And thank you for the explanation about that. I've always been curious about that. Now I know. Thanks, KI4DCR, back to net.
Hey, Charles,
Yes.
can I just add something real quick to that?
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody earlier today about how freely available all of the model information is now. And for instance, the American Ensemble models go out 384 hours, which is 15 days, I think it is, 15 or 16 days. And it's fantasy land out that far into the future, but yet this stuff's available. And for people who aren't trained to know what the pitfalls are, they'll grab one of these images and put it on social media.
Yes.
And the living daylights out of everybody.
Yep.
And then the next day, the same model will have nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So I sometimes wonder if we should be a little bit more careful about who we make all this stuff, available to. It's the same thing with me. It's like I know nothing about economics, so don't give me too much information, or I might share something that's not true with somebody.
Very good point. And that, yeah, I'll see a post on Facebook says, oh, well, they're saying 12 inches in Raleigh and it's going to be a blizzard. And then, there are these, Joe wannabe weather out of Wake Forest or something. I'll make up something. And then you'll get closer and closer. And you watch the real meteorologists like yourself, and they're like, nah, we're not really seeing that. But the other guys are going, oh, yeah, we are. And then as it gets closer, they hide and they go away. And they're like, oh, well, the model's changed or something. And they just suddenly get quiet. So that was really well said. I'm going to ask a quick question.
Sure.
And that was the only one I could think of to ask. And that was, why is Raleigh so windy in the winter and the early spring, but not so much the rest of the year?
Wow, that's an interesting question. In general, not just in Raleigh, but in many locations across the United States, the summer is the least windiest time of year outside of thunderstorms and tornadoes and that type of thing. And it's generally because the wind is driven by temperature contrast, and especially at the jet stream level. And so in the summertime, it can be in the 90s in Minnesota and the 90s in Texas. And so you have almost no temperature contrast at all, and the winds through all the levels of the atmosphere are weak. But when you head into the fall and winter and spring, then you are starting to accumulate temperature contrast because it's getting very cold along the Canadian border, but it's still pretty warm down in South Florida and South Texas. And so the winds at the jet stream level increase. That makes the storm stronger. And when you have stronger storms, you have more wind. So that certainly makes sense in the sense that in the summertime, you just don't get that much air movement. And that's one of the reasons it feels so darn uncomfortable, is that it's humid and the air's not moving and there's no evaporation of the water off your skin, and you just feel miserable.
I stop every we're trying to keep our transmissions to about 3 minutes or less for the repeater.
Okay.
So, and we're doing good with that so far. And that was a great answer. And I've been wanting to ask that for years, but I've been saving that question for a real meteorologist instead of one of these Facebook meteorologists that got their degree off of Facebook, because I know they probably would never even answer me. All right. So we're going to go to a guy that you know well next, and that's KI4CFS Martin. And Martin is up next. Go ahead, Martin, with your question.
Hey, Greg. Yeah, the question that came to mind is, I had heard that the European model was better because they had more money to fund it, and that they were selling the content while the American was making it free for use, and that the European might have a little better programming, higher speed computers, because they were a profit center. Is there any accuracy to that, or what's your comment on it?
There is definitely truth to that. In fact, the only way that people like me can get access to the European model output is because there are a number of companies around the United States that pay handsomely, and when I say handsomely, I'm talking $200,000 a year.
Wow.
To access all of the model data, and then they make that up by selling subscriptions to people like me that don't have $200,000 a year. And through all those subscriptions, they recover, I guess, I would assume all the costs, if not more, because they're not in business for their health. But you are right. The American government basically just gives away freely everything we do, and the European government charges handsomely, not just to us, but to everybody around the world. So it could very well be that they're able to hire, better programmers, invest in higher cost computers. I don't have that information. Like, in other words, if I was in the court of law, I couldn't prove that right off the bat. But it certainly makes sense that when you're a profit center, as you mentioned, that you are able to do more things than you can if you're not.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thanks so much, and thanks for Charles, all the work, and Danny and everyone in putting this together. Back to net control, KI4DCR, KI4CFM.
All right. Excellent. This is progressing along well. So let's go to WA4OSS. Charlie in Nightdale is next with your question.
WA4OSS, I don't know that I have a question, but enjoy listening to the answers from the other ones there. And hello to a fellow coworker there, to Greg from WA4OSS.
And hello to you.
All right. We will go to Jeff, N0RNE, up in Henderson. Jeff, do you have a question?
Good evening, Charles. Everybody else on this is N0RNE. Sitting here trying to think of a question, and I just have not been able to come up with one. It's good to hear you on here, sir. Thank you for your expertise in this. I just thought of one that I've been pondering for a little bit. We're just studying meteorology. Study of something. But do you study meteors?
His question was, do you study meteors?
No, and that's a really interesting question, is that the Greek word meteor refers to atmosphere, and ology is the study of. So the Greek translation of the word meteorology is study of the atmosphere. I still have a very good friend who used to work for CP&L as a meteorologist back in the day, and the people, when he would tell them he was a meteorologist for CP&L, they would ask him, "Do you read meters?" And of course, he had to explain to them that no, I don't. I try to forecast the weather and help them predict load in different areas and so forth. So those are common questions, but it's a Greek translation, so it doesn't mean what it sounds like it means.
All right, thank you very much, Greg.
You're welcome.
That was a good explanation. I hadn't thought of that one. Very good. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Does anybody on the Facebook live feed have a question for Greg? I've gotten probably 8 or 10 people, that maybe more, that are in the Facebook live. And do any of them have a question? And I will stand by for a second and see if anyone responds to that.
This is Kilo 4 Delta Kilo X-ray down here in the Charlotte area. I'm actually in Cherryville. And I was just kind of curious, how much of difference is there between the Raleigh and the Charlotte area as far as the weather conditions are concerned?
That's a great question. This tends to be true, especially in the winter and the spring. We have a phenomenon here called cold air damming. And it's when shallow cold air gets trapped east of the Appalachian Mountains. And the farther you are away from the coast, the less warming influence the coast has. So there have been a number of times during these episodes where Charlotte and Greensboro will be colder than Raleigh. And in some instances, that can actually result in a difference in precipitation type, where Charlotte and Greensboro could end up having sleet and freezing rain or even snow, and Raleigh maybe has a mix or all rain, and then farther east it's really, really mild as you head toward the coast. So Charlotte being farther inland than Raleigh is, the actual distance from the coast, tends to put it in a little bit more of a favorable location for that cold air to really get trapped and entrenched. But on a normal day, with the sun out and so forth, the elevation above sea level difference is not that huge, and you're not going to see more than a degree or two difference.
Excellent. Well, that's I just kind of was able to jump in on this thing while you guys were there. I managed to get it up and running, but yeah, I'm trying to get in with the local Gaston County group down here to help with that kind of stuff, and it's kind of interesting. It is quite interesting. So, but thank you much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'm glad you could make it on.
All right. Is there anybody else on Zoom or on the Facebook that would like to ask Greg a question? I know we've got about 15 people here on Zoom, so anybody else on Zoom? All right, anybody else on the repeater? Any stations A through Z? We've got about 8 minutes left to fill, so feel free if you've got a question, now's the time. If you're on Facebook Live, you can do that, or on the radio. So any stations on the radio, acknowledge.
KI4DCR, W4TTO, and another question.
All right, Joe, go ahead. You're up. W4TTO, back with a recheck. Go ahead.
Thank you, Charles. And hey, Greg, maybe you could give a brief description or explanation of during hurricane season how the millibars are reflected to the strength of the hurricane. W4TTO.
Sure. There's actually an old scale called the Saffir-Simpson scale, where they would correlate certain pressure readings or levels with the intensity of a storm. It's not absolutely foolproof, but it's pretty close. And generally, and I'm trying to remember the exact cutoffs right now, but if you get a storm that goes down to like 935 or 925 millibars, you're almost certainly at Cat 4. I think Hugo, when it hit Charleston, was at 935. I think when Andrew hit Homestead, Florida, it was like maybe around 910, something like that. And by the way, there's an easy well, I'll call it easy, but there is a conversion from millibars to inches of mercury that most home barometers are inches of mercury. So 29.92 inches of mercury is equal to 1,013.2 millibars. Huh. So you can just do the multiplication, and if you're ever curious about what our millibar reading is here, or wherever you happen to be, you can just use that conversion factor. But yeah, once things start to get below 960, 950, then you're talking about a really, really powerful storm. And really what you're doing is looking at the difference in pressure between the middle of the storm to the outer edges of it. And the force that drives the wind is called the pressure gradient force. And it's the greater difference you have in pressure over the same distance, the stronger the wind blows. So if the pressure gets really low in the middle of it and the pressure on the outer edges doesn't change all that much, the difference is larger, and then therefore the wind is stronger.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it. W4TTO, back to net control.
All right, before we run out of time, I want to take the last 4 or 5 minutes for Greg to talk about how we can follow him on social media, including the Patreon that he has. I'm really, Mark Perkins says, Greg, I got to say this real quick. Ask Greg to look into the crystal ball and tell us when we'll have measurable snowfall in central North Carolina. So real quick.
I think we may be looking at next year.
Yeah.
There is an outside shot sometime over the next 10 days, but I certainly would not call my bookie in Vegas and bet large amounts of money on it.
All right, let's talk about how to follow you and how to get involved with your channel and all this.
Well, the Patreon thing, I didn't even know about it until my two sons told me about it at dinner last summer. And that's when you know you're getting old, because your kids are telling you all this stuff you don't know. But, they just said, well, gee, you still have a little bit of a following left over from television, and maybe you could, make some money off of that. So I looked into it and bought myself a green screen and downloaded some software. And so now I do a daily video Monday through Friday, and it's on average about 8 to 10 minutes long. And I changed the format, so I do the forecast first. So if you don't have any interest in the science behind it and would just want to know if it's going to rain or not, then you have the option to do that. But if you're one of these weather nerds or geeks like I am and you want to get into all the other details, then you can stick around and watch the rest of it. But that subscription goes for $3 a month. And then for an additional $2 a month, I do 2 what I call bonus weather education videos, where I'll talk about some concept associated with meteorology and go into a little bit more of a deeper dive into that topic. So that's $5 a month if you want to do that. And so, for those of you that are older in the audience and you know about fixed incomes and that kind of thing, this was a way for me to do something that I love to do and pick up, a little bit extra money on the side. And I'd love to have you check it out. If you're not interested, you're not going to hurt my feelings, but always like to at least make people aware of it. And then there's an HVAC company in Fayetteville, North Carolina called Bland's Air Plumbing and Electric. And they hired me to be their spokesperson a little over a year ago. And so I have a Facebook page called I think it's the Official Weather and Other Stuff page. And I do a video update on there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and more frequently if something's going on.
Hey, let me just a quick pause and then we'll reset.
Yeah.
Hang on. And Martin wanted to let everybody know about your YouTube, youtube.com, and then / Gregory Fishel / featured. Does that sound correct?
I believe that is right. I don't have it on the top of my head, but I think that's right.
Well, it's in the group, so we've got it here, and Martin says it's free, I've been a Patreon subscriber for a while, and I like it because you're from this area, or you've been in this area long enough, you know the patterns here, you know how things work around here. It's very well trusted, and I get the little pop-up thing says there's a new forecast. I pull it up. I can watch it right then, or I can watch it a little bit later. And remind folks that occasionally you come to town and interact with us and sit down and have a coffee with us.
Yes, exactly. And I'm probably getting close to the point of being overdue to do that again. So the last time we met at Panera Bread, and about 15, 20 people showed up. We had a great time, and we'll be doing more of that.
All right. If anybody have a last question or anything for Greg before we close it out, because I only get 40 minutes on my Zoom plan. Jeff, your signal is terrible. You're going to have to get a little better than that, because I can hardly understand what you're saying. A little bit. Go ahead. Good question. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I have not looked at this recently, but when I was at WRAL years ago, I had a similar question in my own mind and went back and actually looked at 30 or 40 years worth of data, and I found that I could find mild winters followed by hot.
Well, unfortunately, we timed ourselves out on our Zoom, so I will get him to do the question here. I didn't get my full 40 minutes, but nothing I can do about that. So we are clear with him. And sorry, Jeff, I will, next time we do one of these, I'll just pay for the longer Zoom, but I didn't think we would last this long. Plus, I'd promised him we'd only do 30 minutes, and we ran right at 38. All right, well, this has been a good experiment, a learning experiment for me. I'm going to get him on the phone real quick and get him to answer this question for you, Jeff. Just hang on just a second. Get you on speaker.
Hello?
Hey, can you answer this guy? My Zoom ran out. Answer Jeff's question. Yeah, we missed the answer, so let me do it by phone.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I had the same question years ago, and I did a little bit of research when I was at the TV station, and I found mild winters that were followed by hot summers, and I found mild winters that were followed by cool summers. So, did I say that right? In other words, I found both combinations is what I'm trying to say. Now, there are some people that think that because we're transitioning into an El Nino, and we've been in a La Nina for 3 years now, that because of that, some people are saying that there could be unprecedented heat this summer. That's a pretty strong statement, and I'm not quite sure that I would want to be associated with that statement, at least not at this point. But it is going to be interesting to see whether or not we do really transition into an El Nino, and if we do, then do we end up having a blisteringly hot summer? And quite frankly, I don't have an answer for you on that definitively at this point.
Thank you for that answer. That is a better informed answer than I could have ever given. And that just shows your time and expertise in this field. Thank you very much for that answer. Turn it back over to Ted. It's Zero Arnie.
Anybody else with any final thoughts, questions, or comments before I let Greg go?
N4DCR, this is KI4DCR.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is what ham radio is about, trying out these different things and juggling it all. So it's been great fun to be part of it. Thanks, Greg, for joining us. Really fun. Again, it's a hobby, and great job, Charles. And thanks for Danny. I know you talked to him as well, and everyone else. KI4CFS.
Great comments, Martin. Anybody else before I let Greg go, and then I'll wrap the net up?
WD4CE.
Yes, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, I just want to thank Greg for doing this and all the other people that made it happen. And then the question is, during his career, did he ever fly through one of the hurricane plane where he'd have to fly through a hurricane?
Do you know that I had a chance to do that probably 30 years ago, and I turned it down because at that time, any turbulence at all in an airplane I associated with impending death. And I've gotten better with that, and I sort of wish I would now have another opportunity to do it, and I don't know if I ever will. But it used to be that if I was just on a commercial flight and it got the least bit bumpy, I was just petrified. And I figured, well, if I can't handle that, flying through a hurricane is not going to go well. So the answer is no, I haven't, but I hope that maybe I can put that on my bucket list before I leave the planet.
Okay, thanks so much. I was just curious about that. Things net control. WD4CE.
Anyone else? Final thoughts, comments, or questions?
You know, Charles, I do have a favorite weather joke I wanted to share with everybody if there's time.
All right, hang on a second, and go ahead and start now.
Okay, I do have a favorite weather joke that I wanted to share with everybody if there's time.
Yes.
Okay, and I want to preface this by saying I am not endorsing any inappropriate activity. This is purely a joke, okay? There was a married couple sound asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the phone rang, and the husband picked it up, and his wife heard him say into the phone, "How the heck would I know? It's 150 miles from here." And he hangs up. And she said, "Honey, who was that?" And he says, "I don't know. Somebody called and asked whether or not the coast was clear."
That's a good one, and one that I've not heard before. That's cool. Well, Greg, I can't thank you enough for this. It's on my list for 6 months now. I've been talking to Martin about it. And then I finally got your email and we made the connection. And I wasn't sure how I was going to put it all together, but I had Danny Hampton, who's the repeater operator or owner or trustee, whatever you want to call it, for the repeater. And he said Zoom or Skype or something was the best. And next time I'll just get the the package for the Zoom Pro. We do this with you or anyone else. And I would certainly love for you to come back in a few months as maybe we get into summer and then into hurricane season, and we can do this and talk about, the different zone that we'll be in at that time.
I would love to do that.
All right. I'm going to get Greg off the phone. Hang on a second here, Matt. All right, man. Thank you so much. You're off the air right now. It's just me. And keep in touch. Love the Patreon. I will promote this all over the internet when it goes tomorrow. It'll be shared all over the place, and hopefully it'll help you out.
Oh, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Have a good night, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Take
See
it
you.
easy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. I let Greg go so he could get back because he stayed a good 15, 20 minutes past what we said. So if anybody wants to do a rag chew, has any comments, anything on the radio, feel free to do so. I've got a few more minutes left.
Charles, I had one announcement in 4GTI.
Go right ahead.
Hey, yes, in 4GTI. I just want to remind everybody that the biweekly Student Amateur Radio Society meeting 442.675 on NC State campus, that'll be held tonight coming up in about 15 minutes at 8 p.m. N4GTI, back to net control.
That was another reason I wanted to make sure this was over, because you got RarsNet then, and you got that net that's coming up. And I think we did real well. We probably could have done better with the Zoom, and that was my fault because it didn't give me the amount of minutes that it said it was going to give me. It shorted me by like 5 minutes. So I don't know what happened with that. Because its version of 40 minutes and mine were about 8 minutes off. So not sure what happened, but next time I'll just get the Pro package, because we can do this with other people if we want to, now that I know how to do it, and I can do a much better job next time. Any other comments or anything? And yeah, the NC State net 442-675 PL 100 at 8 o'clock. Anybody else got any comments or announcements or anything? Go ahead. Your signal's a little better this time.
Yeah, conditions keep changing. It's windy out there. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you, Charles, for the effort you put in to do this. Was a good net. Was very interesting the way things went. Was good. I guess a suggestion would be maybe next time, whatever you've got the Zoom on, if you could have an external speaker, the microphone for the radio may pick it up a little bit better. But other than that, thank you very much. It was a good net. Thanks for all the work you put in. N0 Arnie.
Yeah, next time, instead of doing the Zoom on the iPad, I have a MacBook Pro over here, and I also have a fairly new Windows 10 laptop that's really fast. And so I would do it on that. But neither one of them have the Zoom app on them right now. And my phone and my iPad had the Zoom password stored, and I don't have any freaking idea what it was. So that would have taken some doing to figure that out. Whereas the iPad and the iPhones. But yeah, I could have taken the iPad now and Bluetoothed it to a JBL speaker or a Bose speaker I've got here, and that would have done it. But yeah, good comments. I think all the way around it went for the first time. I used to do this at the radio stations all the time. I would give away tickets and prizes and stuff, and people would call in. I would record them. They would tell me what radio station played the best music. I would record all this, their name, their excitement. And then 10 minutes afterwards, when the song's playing, I would play it back. And I was really good at all that. But that was in the 80s and early 90s. And things are different now. Everything's computerized. And, I wasn't quite sure how to do it. But Ron Casey and Danny, especially Danny, really helped out a lot. And I've learned, like you said, there's a few things I could tweak to make it a lot better. Any more comments?
N4DCR, KI4CFS.
KI4DCR. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, what a blast. Keep trying. Like I said, fantastic. And I want to ask, could I just make an announcement?
Yeah, go right ahead with your announcement. Sure.
I just wanted to let people know Charles and I and a few others started the North Carolina Amateur Radio Operator group on Facebook. Feel free to make any announcements on it. And then we have an Echolink net that thanks to Charles and some others mentoring, I do once a month on the first Monday at 6:30. So that's kind of for Echolink so that we can reach across the state and not keep it simple. But and this was just a blast to be part of this kind of first-time experiment. Thanks again. KI4 CFS, click.
Yeah, the NC Outdoor, NC Amateur Radio Operators Group's got over 2,000 members from all over the place. And then we have the 146.88 K4ITL repeater and group on Facebook. And I've got almost 300 members in that, which is pretty good for a little local group. And it's pretty active. I try to post a lot of interesting stuff, and a lot of other folks do too. So lots of different social media. And then I have an Instagram, and that's North Carolina Amateur Radio under Instagram. I think it's what I've got it set up at. And that's, matter of fact, I'm going to look at that real quick because I want to make sure I'm giving you guys the right information on that. But I have a tremendous amount of followers on that page. It's NC Amateur Radio _ KI4DCR on Instagram. And I've got like 600-700 followers on. I post. Sometimes I'll live stream the net on there too. So it's a lot of fun. I think Greg did great. He was very communicative, and we tested stuff last night and then tonight again. And he gave great answers. And I encourage people to spend the $3 a month because it's kind of what I call non-biased weather. It's not any artificial hype involved or anything. Not to say that others are, but some of these Facebook weather forecasts are kind of out there. So he's going to give it to you like it is, and I really enjoy it. Final comments, because the net at NC State's coming up in about 8 minutes. So I'll throw it out one more time. Any stations, A through Z. Anybody on Facebook, the Facebook live feed is still going. So anybody else have any comments or anything? If so, call now. And if I don't hear anything, I'll close it out. All right. I think that maybe Bob, N4GEB, is calling the Thursday night, or it may be me. I have no idea, but I'll figure it out between now and Thursday. Thanks, everybody. And I've learned some tips here to do it a little better. I'll use a laptop next time for the Zoom. I was going to use my big desktop computer, but I use that for the streaming because it works well. It has all solid state drives, and I know it's not going to fail. But this was great. And it was a lot of fun, and I'll have to figure out who we can have on here next. So now that I know how to do it. Looks like we had about 20 people, maybe a little more than that, because there's still people commenting and stuff on the video feed. So I will close the net for tonight. And as I said, the NC State net's coming up here in just a minute. RARS is coming up, and lots of other fun things going on. So thanks to Rose and Danny, Ron Casey, Martin, Greg, everybody else that got into this. It's our net, it's not my net or anybody else's singular. It's our net as a community. So appreciate everything. I'll turn the repeater back to normal activity. I'm going to go get a snack and go watch some TV with the XYL. 73. Rose and Danny, great job. You rock. Great job for putting this hard work together. It was informative, and we could see Greg on the screen well. Audio was fantastic. 21 check-ins.